Senator Nash.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. When we come into this place, those of us on this side of the chamber have a very firm belief that we have a responsibility to ensure a secure future for the Australian people. That's what we believe. That's a priority. That is absolutely what we strive to do every single day. There is no doubt that we are facing very serious times, as my colleague Senator Cormann said, that we are facing very difficult times. What we are looking at the moment, brought to us by the Labor government, is $42 billion worth of economic stimulation, according to them, a $42 billion package. A $42 billion package, according to them, that is designed to stimulate the economy in these difficult times. Earlier today, my colleague Senator Mason pointed out, in fact, that in actuality it's not an economic stimulus, it's a political stimulus. You don't have to scratch very far into this package to realise that it is not going to deliver the economic stimulus that is needed. That is what we believe on this side, and that is the reason why we are not supporting these bills. The primary intent of this legislation is not going to be achieved. Labor wants to have that economic stimulus. We don't believe it is there. And you do not have to scratch very far to look at that political stimulus. With all the hype and media focus on it, the package being the economic stimulus, if you drill down and if the media has a close look, line by line by line, through what this package is, it smacks of political stimulus. One of the things that is quite extraordinary about this is the arrogance, the absolute arrogance of the Labor government in asking the coalition to tick off on this package within a matter of 48 hours. It is just extraordinary. And it's even more extraordinary because we don't have to go back very far to till the coalition was then in government, and that we were subjected to hours of railing from the then opposition, from this side of the chamber, saying how they weren't able to scrutinise legislation, that they weren't able to look at things properly, that it was a dereliction of duty, that they weren't able to have a good look at legislation. And now what do we see? We see that very same Labor Party sitting on the other side saying, rush it through, tick it off, don't look at it, don't scrutinise it, we don't want you to say a thing about this after any scrutiny, just tick it off. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but that is a directly different position from the one that they had when they sat over here to when they moved over there and decided that it was quite okay to rush stuff through, expect the coalition to tick it off, thank you very much. And Senator Cormann did make some comments earlier about the hypocritical nature of that. I just comment that it is extraordinary, and the Australian people should look at what the Labor Party did when they were in opposition and now what they are doing when they're in government. $42 billion, $42,000 million, and the Labor government, the Rudd government, expected the Liberal and National parties to say, oh, that's fine, Prime Minister, you just pop that right on through. I'm sure the Australian people will be fine if we tick off on $42 billion worth of their money without having a look at it, but sure, we'll just go right ahead and do that. We don't think so. We want some appropriate scrutiny of these bills. It is right and it's proper and it's fair, and the Australian people deserve it. And my very good colleague Senator Joyce said earlier today, why the haste? Why the haste? What difference does a few days make when we are going to have some proper scrutiny? Why the haste? As he said, there are a pile of boom gates behind a shed somewhere that maybe might be pulled out and have a bit of a quick run out around the country. Don't think so. And while boom gates are a very worthy and very necessary thing for the rural Australia, living in rural Australia, I absolutely know that, as my other rural colleagues do in this chamber on this side, I don't actually see it as the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about what's going to lead us to an economic recovery. I can't actually see President Obama sitting over there going, OK, right, I'm in now, what am I going to do? Quick think. Now, OK, economic recovery, 200 million people, 900 billion. I know, boom gates. It's not appropriate. And while that is only one part of this package, it is an example of what comes back to my earlier statement of it being a political stimulus. That is about politics. That is about politics. And my good colleague Senator Joyce also mentioned the bats this morning. Bats, pink bats, another thing to drive the economic recovery. Bats in the ceiling. And my very good colleague Senator Williams over there pointed out, a very, very close companion of his, pointed out it was going to do her absolutely no good at all in her house. So how much work, how much scrutiny have they actually put from the government into what they're doing? Now, Senator Wong, the minister, was asked this afternoon in question time around the Energy Efficient Homes program, the BATs, going into the homes, and the question was, what was the estimate of the carbon dioxide that will be emitted in the manufacture and distribution of the insulation required for the 2.2 million homes targeted under the government's program? Well, guess what, Mr Acting Deputy President? She didn't know. The minister could not answer that question. Now, this is from a government from the other side that rail constantly about how important the environment is, and it is. It is extremely important, and in spite of the minister's comments that we often hear from this side of the chamber, we are very, very conscious of the importance of the environment on this side of the chamber, and particularly those of us who are farmers who realise if you don't look after the land won't look after you. But a question like that anybody would think, perhaps the government's actually considered what the effect of rolling out these bats is, seeing that's such a great idea and it's one of their keynote things. The minister couldn't answer the question. Now, is this indicative of the amount of work and scrutiny that's actually gone into their own package? If they don't know the answers, how on earth are the Australian people going to get the answers? How on earth are the people in Australia going to have any confidence that the Labor government has put this package together with the right amount of analysis, scrutiny, foresight and thought that it deserves? And it's that very reason, it is that very reason that we don't believe they have, that we're not supporting it. We are not going to support it for precisely those reasons. Interestingly, my colleague Senator Cormann said earlier that the Labor Party's reverted to type, and he is quite right. Borrow, 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 spend, 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 borrow, borrow, borrow. It's what they know, it's what they do. Sound economic management are not three words that are in their vocabulary. It's about borrowing and it's about spending, and it's not their money. There is not money that's suddenly $42 billion that's just recently fallen down out of the sky or we managed to pull up from underneath the building. This is Australian taxpayers' dollars. This is Australian people's money. And $42 billion is an extraordinarily huge amount of money. $42,000 million. And perhaps the ALP hasn't realised, but going into debt has its consequences. It has consequences. And who is going to pay it back? Well, I tell you who's going to pay it back. Our children. It's our children that are going to pay it back. It's my William, my Henry, Barnaby Joyce's 4, all my colleagues' children, and every other family's children in this country that is going to pay this back. Now, I don't know if the Labor Party has actually thought about that, but these are real children that are going to be burdened with this debt for years and years and years to come. Debt for a package that we don't believe is even going to go close to delivering the economic stimulus that is actually required. We're not going to tick off on $42 billion of spending that is going to plunge mums, dads and our children into enormous debt for years and years and years. Mr Rudd, the Prime Minister, is constantly talking about working families, as are all of the other Labor members, because they work on message and they're like little parrots and they all say exactly the same thing all the time. And they're constantly talking about working families. Well, working families are going to be working for a very, very, very long time to pay this back. That's if they've got a job. Thank you, Senator Cormann. I'll take that interjection. That's if they've got a job, because this package should be about productivity and job creation, not handing out buckets of money in a cash splash that is going to disappear and disappear to China or goodness knows where else like the last $10 billion.